Good evening, everyone. I think we've achieved critical mass, so we're going to go ahead and get started. We may still have a few people joining us, but I am so delighted to welcome you to our program tonight. My name is Erin Purdy. I'm the Deputy Executive Director of the Briscoe Center. And our program, as you know, features legendary photojournalist Diana Walker and historian Dr. Don Carleton, who is the founding executive director of the Briscoe Center. He's also the author of 14 books and the producer of 2 PBS documentaries, among other accomplishments that we don't have time to get into. We're here tonight to celebrate our new exhibit, Through Her Lens, the Photojournalism of Diana Walker. You are all invited, of course, to join us after the program concludes for a reception at the Briscoe Center, and you'll be among the first to see this wonderful exhibition. But in truth, we are here to commemorate the entirety of Diana's career. We are joined by her family, her friends, her colleagues, her competitors, friendly competitors, to honor the woman that Jamie Lee Curtis has described as the most spectacular human being. We're here to celebrate Diana's ability to capture the world's most powerful and illustrious people in moments of intimacy, humor, and humanity, all made possible by her combination of technical expertise, diligent preparation, empathy, and charm. Tonight, you'll learn more about Diana's career as a photographer, although I know many of you know the stories. But her career really started when she would develop pictures in her basement darkroom of her childhood home in Washington, D.C. After shooting amateur photographs of events like the 1963 Civil Rights March at the Lincoln Memorial and President John F. Kennedy's funeral, Diana freelanced for Washington Monthly in the early 1970s, which very importantly gave her media credentials to access the White House and Capitol Hill. In 1979, she became a contract photographer for Time magazine. 5 years later, Time assigned her to cover the White House, an assignment she continued until January 2001, when she returned to her former job as a Time contract photographer. In addition to Time, Walker's photographs have been featured in numerous media outlets such as People magazine, the New York Times magazine, Vanity Fair, Life, The Atlantic, Newsweek, and many more, including prominent international news outlets such as Paris Match, Stern, and the London Sunday Times. Her books include Public and Private, 20 Years Photographing the Presidency, The Bigger Picture, 30 Years of Portraits, and Hillary, the Photographs of Diana Walker. Diana's work has been recognized by the World Press and the National Press Photographers Association. She received the Smithsonian's National Portrait Gallery's Paul Peck Award in 2003 for her interpretation and portrayal of the presidency. In 2012, Time honored Diana with its Henry Luce Award for Life Achievement. And just this spring, she received the White House News Photographers Association Lifetime Achievement Award. Diana accomplished all of this during an era when being a woman in the competitive world of news photography was very much the exception. And as you'll see this evening, it is quite in character for Diana Walker to pair being the exception with being exceptional. As the home of Diana's archive, the Briscoe Center is honored to preserve her work and make it available for research and scholarship now and into the future. Her archive helped establish our American photojournalism collections, which have grown to be of international significance. We're also the home of one of the most comprehensive collections in existence relating to news media history, with hundreds of collections that include the personal papers of media industry pioneers and leaders, such as Walter Cronkite, as well as clipping and research morgues, oral histories, newspapers, and of course, photographs. I should also mention that Diana's work dovetails with our congressional and political collections, which include the papers of more than 50 former members of Congress, as well as governors, state lawmakers, and political operatives. We not only preserve and protect these treasures, we encourage their use to create new understandings of our past. This program tonight and the exhibit you'll enjoy later are just a few examples of how powerful our collections can be when they are shared. Before I bring our speakers to the stage, I want to recognize Dr. Sarah Sonner, the Center's Director of Exhibitions, and Jill Morena, our Curator for Material Culture, for their outstanding work on Through Her Lens. I'd also like to recognize our partners at McKinney & York who designed the exhibition. And I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge Allison Beck, our Director of Special Projects. Allison and her team have played a crucial role. Really, Allison has been of paramount importance to building our photojournalism collections, including Diana's. And of course, we owe the biggest thank you to Diana for entrusting her photographic archive to the center and for her many years of friendship and support. Please join me in welcoming Diana Walker and Dr. Don Carleton to the stage. Thank you all.
That's my family.
Well, welcome everyone, and I hope you can hear me. So the mics are working okay, Diana. Welcome to this wonderful event that we're having here in honor of Diana Walker. Diana, welcome back to Austin, the University of Texas, and back to the Briscoe Center.
Happy to be here.
We have had, I think I've known you for about 25 years. And we've had some adventures, and we've had some other exhibits and some other projects.
Yep.
So it's been a wonderful relationship for me, and I thank you for that. We're going to have the opening of this exhibit immediately after we do this program, and we'll have a reception, as Aaron stated. We've got about 200 photographs, 200 of Diana's wonderful photographs on display. And so you'll get a chance to see that, but that's only a tiny fraction of her archive, which was enormous.
I'm horrified to hear how many photographs you do have. I didn't know I took that many.
Yeah, and we've looked at every single one of them.
Oh,
so,
stop it. 250,000?
Yes, 250,000 photographs that Diana has taken. So
I think I overshot.
No, I don't. I don't think you shot enough.
No.
So we've talked. We had a dinner last night, and we talked about this incredible career that she's had, and what a wonderful journalist with a camera she's been. But I want to throw something else in here, Diana, and that is that the reason why we wanted your collection from the very start is for history. You've done this incredible job of conveying visual news to consumers of news. But these photographs that we're preserving and making available for education, for research and teaching, are going to continue to give and give and give. Historians will be all over them. Students will be using them. And it's a gift to history. So I think it's important for us to realize that Diana's not only been a tremendously wonderful and gifted photographer, photojournalist, but she has also been preserving history by her work. And, historians have a saying, where there's no records, there's no history. And so by taking these photographs, you've created this record, this visual record.
Well, that, Don, is one of the reasons I'm delighted to have my archive here. And that's because you used them. That's because students look at them. It's because you put them out on the net for school children. Otherwise, these would all still be in my basement in Washington, and I wouldn't be married anymore.
Well, Diana, I mean, the operating philosophy that we have is that photographs can be, not all of them, of course, but many photographs, particularly the kind of photographs you take, can be used for historical research. They're evidence. You've documented events. And in some ways, the photographs that you've taken and the events you've captured visually some of that is, there's no other record really. I mean, because you've done so much candid photography, and there's not necessarily any written records that go with that. So again, as a historian, I'm indebted to you for your work. Okay, so thank you.
Well, thank you.
And so let's do the fun stuff here. We're going to look at some photographs, and I want you to talk about them. I'll say a few words, but we want to hear the stories related to those photographs and what memories they invoke when you look at them. And we're going to be looking at a monitor down here to make sure we know what we're looking at, so we don't sprain our necks here doing this. So why don't we go ahead and start here, crew? And why don't we start? Why don't we start off? As they say, let's begin at the beginning.
Yes. Well, this is an embarrassing picture. It is a self-portrait, which I think was taken when I was at Foxcroft School in Middleburg, Virginia, and I recognized the uniform. And heaven knows what I thought I was doing, but I seemed to have caught my eyes half closed, and perhaps that's emblematic of how badly I do it in my studies. But I was taking pictures and printing pictures in the darkroom when I was in school more than I was studying geometry.
Well, thankfully, we're glad for that. We've got enough geographers, but we need more good photographers. How did you become a professional photographer, though?
Well, that it was kind of a long story, but I will cut it short to say that it had been my hobby for a long time. And then I got starstruck. I decided that the stage was the thing. And so I studied drama, and then fell in love, got married, had 2 children, and made a very good friend who's here tonight, Gail Tarana, who's a friend, and she was from New York, and she lived in Washington. We were married the same day. We had children maybe 3 or 4 years after we both had been married, and we spent a lot of time talking to each other. And she suggested one day, why didn't I pick up photography again? And why didn't I go into business? And I had no idea how to go into business. And she said, I'll go into business with you. I said, oh, come on. She said, no, I'll pay the bills, and I'll do everything, you shoot the pictures. And I said, you'd really do that? And she said, yes, I will. Let's go. And let's call ourselves I Am a Camera. And so we did. And that's how I began taking pictures for real.
So your first, now, most of your work that you're known for, you've done a lot of other work, okay, but is White House photography, of course. So your first assignment was the Carters, isn't that correct? I mean, your first White House assignment?
Yes.
And I think we've got a photograph here that we could go to. That's a photograph you took of Carter with Cyrus Vance.
Yes. This was not a photo opportunity, as they call the official pictures that we take in the White House. This was taken by me, not realizing that I wasn't really supposed to take a picture that wasn't a scheduled photo opportunity. But I was being taken out to the South Lawn to set up for a picture that had been called for 11 o'clock, I think. And when we came back in, I noticed President Carter sitting and talking very privately with Cyrus Vance, the Secretary of State. And that morning, that night, there had been an attempt to free the American hostages who were being kept in Iran. And it failed, and the helicopters crashed, and many soldiers were killed, and it was just very, very sad. And it was Carter's real attempt to bring them back at that point. And I just picked up my camera and I shot the picture. And I don't think it ever ran anywhere, but that's how it happened.
I think that makes sort of the definition of candid photograph.
Oh, I see.
They're definitely not posing, and they're having a pretty serious discussion.
That's right.
You also see the photograph, the next one there, of Rosalind Carter. You went with her to Thailand, I understand.
Yes, it was really, it was such luck. It was just a real break for me. And I think that's an important element of my achievement, if there is such a thing, that things sort of went my way over the years. And in this case, President Carter said that he was not going to leave the White House. He actually said, "I'm not going to leave the Rose Garden until I get the hostages back on American soil." And he said, "My wife, Rosalind, will go in my stead on all the foreign trips that we have planned on our schedule, and all the states where my name is on the ballot for the 1980 election." And so our presidential photographer at that time, his name was Arthur Grace. And I remember Arthur getting a little bit upset because he had to stay in the Rose Garden with the president, and this new freelancer they were using, they assigned to go off with Mrs. Carter on most of her trips. And that was really a break for me, because I learned what it was like to travel with the president, because the First Lady travels the same way, just with fewer people. And so I got to go all over the world with her. Then this picture was taken in Thailand. The Cambodians were fleeing their country because of persecution by the Khmer Rouge. And these poor refugees were coming across the border in terrible condition. And Mrs. Carter went to see how serious the refugee problem was.
How was it, could you characterize your work? How were the Carters? How was it like, what was it like to cover the Carters as a photojournalist?
Well, I have to preface this by saying this was my first presidential involvement. I had been taking pictures of Christmas cards for my friends and book jackets and horses and flowers and a few politicians. But this was the first time I was assigned to the White House. So I had nothing to compare them with. But Mrs. Carter particularly, because she was the person I was sent to cover, she was, absolutely wonderful. She was a very energetic, very dedicated, very serious, really, person who, the first time I went with her up to Massachusetts, where Teddy Kennedy was going to run for president against Carter. And I remember that Rosalind got off the plane and she came into the airport and she was met by a gaggle of press. And this one particularly loud journalist, he was actually in the White House pack of journalists, asked her this question, and he said, how dare you really come to Massachusetts, where you know perfectly well Senator Edward Kennedy is going to run for president against your husband. And she looked at him and she kind of stood up a little bit more and looked right at him, right at the camera. And she said, "May I remind you that my husband is president of Massachusetts too?" And I thought, way to go.
That's great. Well, we've got another very interesting photograph here next. I'll let that sink in for you guys to take them. This is in 1981, and of course, the Reagans followed the Carters into the White House, and this is, of course, a picture of President Reagan and Queen Elizabeth. This is one of your most celebrated images. What's going on here?
It's what?
What's going on here?
Oh, sorry, Don. What went on that night? The Queen had been on a trip to visit the Reagans in California. And she came on, or she flew over, but she brought her yacht, the Britannia, which began in San Diego ostensibly with her on board. And it was going to come up the coast, stopping at different ports along the way. And I was assigned to cover the Queen's trip. And so Larry Barrett, who was the writer covering the White House at that time, was reading some press material that had been handed out on the bus. And I always found if you had a look at that, you really know what was going on. So I asked Larry if I could look at it afterwards, after he finished with it, and he handed it to me, and it said, "The toast of Her Majesty." And I thought, I can't wait to read this. And I read her toast, and her toast had an obvious laugh line in it. So I saw exactly where the laugh line was. And I knew I needed a monopod. I knew I needed a particular length lens. I was ready. I was really ready for that picture. And so I didn't have a monopod, so I had to borrow one from another photographer. And I got all set up, and I broke the monopod. And you can imagine my frustration and upset. And anyway, I bought another monopod for him the next day and thanked him very much for it. But I was kind of down almost on the floor looking up, trying to take this picture. Anyway, the line came when Her Majesty said, "I knew that the Puritans had brought many customs from my country, but I had no idea they had brought all the rain." And this trip was the wettest trip. I have never seen the skies in California like that before. I've never seen them like that since. And it was so funny. The president just threw his head back, just right then. And I think I knew that I had a pretty good picture.
I bet you did, yes.
I did know I had it.
We've got another great photograph, this one of Nancy Reagan, a Statue of Liberty. How did that happen? How did you get this picture?
How did I take this picture?
Yeah.
Well, I was on a cloud.
Well, I also know you have a ladder. So I also know you have a pink ladder.
Oh, yes, I do.
But I think it's too short for this.
No, my pink ladder was given to me by David Cameron.
In fact, we have a picture of the pink ladder.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Oh, all right.
Okay. But what about this?
This was a photo op that the White House really went to extremes to get us up there. It was a small pool. A pool was made up of certain magazines and newspapers and a small pool of photographers. There were about 5 of us, and we were in a helicopter. And we got on the helicopter, and they brought us up, and there was Mrs. Reagan. You can't imagine how weird it was to be outside the Statue of Liberty with, oh, hi, hi, Nancy, you know. And she was with a couple of kids from the Just Say No program that she had initiated and did everything she could to promote. And she did a lot of good work that way. And we were in this helicopter, and you had to get your lens up there and figure out which lens you had to use. And then you had to start focusing, and you were in a helicopter, and you started going like this, and then you started to fall. So you would grab up for one of the straps above you, but that took your hand off the camera. And how were you going to push the shutter when you were going all over the place like this? It was the most difficult photograph I've ever taken, and I am so surprised it was in focus.
Yeah, I mean, there it is.
And that it worked. I can't tell you. It was. She thought it was pretty strange too, I think.
Did she get a copy of that, do you think? Do you think Nancy Reagan ever got a copy of this photograph?
Oh, well, I hope so, because it was really, there were lots of us who took, you couldn't be too imaginative and try something else. It was pretty straightforward, and you also knew that you'd never be there again. Yeah. So you could not miss the picture. So
this isn't like standing in the Rose Garden or anything.
This
is not like standing in the Rose Garden.
Yes,
right?
That's right.
So there, of course, then after Reagan's 2 terms, we have another photograph here, which is pretty stunning. This, of course, is President George H.W. Bush, and it's on November the 22nd, 1990. Tell us about what's going on here.
This was very exciting because we knew something was going on in the Middle East, and we went on a trip over Thanksgiving with Bush to see the troops that were stationed near Saudi Arabia and Kuwait at that time. And we spent the day watching President Bush have Thanksgiving dinner with the troops, and it was all very nice. But there was talk about another picture, and we got in helicopters and followed the president. And he went far, far out into the desert. And there was this huge group of soldiers there. And what they were doing, which we did not know, was preparing for Operation Desert Storm. And we knew they were going to do something, but we didn't know what. And so getting there was, apparently we went on a very circuitous route. And I didn't have a picture. I knew I didn't have a picture from that day that was really compelling. And the whole idea of a president going to have Thanksgiving meal halfway around the world is compelling. And I just didn't have it. And he came to this group of troops, and he had with him various congressmen and a senator or two, and a general, of course, and they were surrounding Bush. And I said to the advance guy, I said, "You've got to get those other people off that podium because we can't see the president." And he said, "Good idea." And he went running up to the podium, and he asked, I can see Congressman Foley right there with his gray hair coming this way. And they did get off and leave the podium, this sort of box the president was standing on. And he reached in his pocket, and he had tie clips just what a soldier needs in the middle of the desert, but it didn't matter. It was a lovely souvenir from him with the presidential seal on it and keychains. And he started throwing them to the troops. And I couldn't believe how beautiful it looked like. It was like Moses, and it was so beautiful that night. The sun was going down, and it was eerie. It was beautiful, and it was a very moving moment, because we assumed that those soldiers were going to be under fire soon, somewhere out there.
Well, it's an amazing photograph.
Oh. Well, it won first prize of World Press, which
that's right.
I'd never gotten a prize like that before.
Well, what you just said brings up the next question I have for you, and that it's my understanding from others who have told on you that you've never had any qualms about giving presidents directions about where they should be standing and so forth. I think there's a backstory.
No, that's
I think there's a back. Well, I have good sources for this.
I see.
So I understand that's kind of an example here. This photograph here.
Well, this.
So we have the record. Okay.
Yes, I know, and this is the only time it happened.
Right.
We were
this is
back.
In Poland, right? This is in Poland, right?
Yes,
yeah.
I'm sorry. Yes, it's in Poland, and it's down by the docks, and it's President Bush with Lech Walesa, who was head of the union, and his wife, and he would become president of Poland eventually. But you can see way in the background all the press up there, and that picture was okay, but not great. So again, it was a question of talking to the advanced people a little bit about making the picture better, which was a good idea for them too. It would get published better.
Correct.
Yes. So I asked if when they got up on the stage, there were people hanging out of a building right behind them. Lots of people in this building. I think it must have been a Secret Service nightmare. But I said, if you could take a pool up there behind or to the side, we could get a picture of all those dock workers in the back, and it would be really wonderful, because the president is going to turn around and call to those people and wave at them. And so that happened, and that's the only time this has ever happened.
Okay.
And up onto the stage we came, this small pool. And Don, this I knew was a big story, and it would be the lead of the nation section or world the next week.
Yeah.
And it was important that I take a picture. And so I looked at all my cameras, and they were all ready, and everything was all set, and they were these new electronic things, digital cameras, and everything was set, and up came the principals with their wives onto the stage. And of course, they saw the people up in the building, and so they turned around, just as I thought they would, and started to wave. And I had my camera at my eye, and I pushed the button, and I pushed the button, and I pushed the button, and the damn camera was dead.
Oh, man.
And I couldn't believe it. And it had the right lens, it had So I just looked down, I got another camera, I took off that lens, I put that in my pocket, I got a lens off the camera I was using, I put it on, and I put the other camera over here, lifted it up, and of course, they'd turned around. It was over. They were facing front now, and I had missed the picture. So I said, I only have one choice. And I had been the person always who never called out to the people to shake hands, and I would chastise my colleagues when they would do that. I just thought, you leave it. It is what it is. If they don't shake, But there I was with my camera with no picture. and Time magazine had sent me all the way over on this trip, right? So this is what I yelled, and I yelled. I said, "Sir, Mr. President, sir, just one more time." And he took Walesa, he took Barbara Bush and Mrs. Walesa, and they turned around and they lifted their arms up and waved, and the president said, "How's this, Lady Di?"
What could you do? You were forced to do it. You were going to have to. You were accountable to Time magazine. So, okay, the next photograph. So we move into the Clinton administration. And I understand this is well, you began your coverage of the Clintons, of course, in 1993. He was elected in 92. And I've been told that this was an especially, tense moment when this photograph was taken, even though it looks like, they're quite at ease. So, tell us what's going on here.
Yes. I had asked to be behind the scenes with the president, and I can't really remember what the circumstances were. But the courts were moving in a direction that was perilous to the president. And one of the things that Michelle Stevenson, my editor at Time, had told me from the start when I began doing these behind-the-scenes pictures was the reason for them was to try and really find out who these people were. You can't, because they always know you're there. But it's the closest I could get to being able to show you something about their character or something about how they did something behind the scenes. A hand on someone's shoulder, or in those kinds of moments, you catch something. And that was what I always wanted to do. I wanted to be able to see if there was affection, if there was anger, if there was whatever. And I was very close that night to the Clintons. I was just working with a Leica with a 35 millimeter lens on. And I was working beside one of their White House photographers, Ralph Olswang. And the two of us were very close, and I would always stick close to the White House photographer because that would tell me where I could go and where I couldn't. And we walked up, and the Clintons had stopped to speak to Eunice Shriver, and that's her back of her head. And the dinner that they were all hosting, the Clintons and the Shrivers, was for the Special Olympics. So it was going to be a lovely festive event. And they stopped to speak to Mrs. Shriver. And all of a sudden, the president put his arms around Hillary. And with all they were going through, with the Monica Lewinsky thing, and the courts, and everything, it was really a very tense time for them. And I love this picture because it shows me something about the president and the First Lady. It shows an intimacy that you don't usually see out in a photo op. And Ralph said that he knew I was excited about the picture because he could hear me going, "Oh my God, oh my God."
Well, so this next picture here that we've got is an interesting one. It's obviously in the Oval Office. And you're in the president's chair, right? Or are you standing behind the desk? Where are you here?
I'm standing between his chair and the desk.
I understand there's an interesting photograph in the photograph.
Yes, there is. I had a request from New York to photograph President Clinton meeting with his staff to decide on what he was going to talk about in the State of the Union. The State of the Union message was the next Tuesday night, and this must have been Friday, I think. And I'd gotten permission to go in and do this picture, and because Time always wanted to have a picture that was relevant at the beginning of the week for whatever the president was going to do that week. And so we would have this on the stands showing you that the State of the Union was Tuesday night, and this was the preparation of it. And it was very hard to shoot a picture that made any sense in the room. And I kind of despaired and thought, well, go around the other way and shoot back at the president and see what it looks like. And indeed, when I came behind the desk, I was slightly distracted for a minute. And that's because I saw on the desk a photograph that I had taken behind the scenes of the Carters on the inauguration night. And it's the picture in the middle on the desk with Hillary on the left, the president in the middle, and Chelsea on the right. And I'm afraid I was kind of bowled over by the idea that a president had a picture of mine on his desk. And he also had a book taken by a friend of mine's friend. So both things just struck me. And so I took the picture, and it worked as a picture for the magazine. And I said, please note, that's my picture on his desk, which you ran when he was inaugurated. So I was very pleased.
Oh, that's a great photograph. For the sake of time, we're going to look at one photograph and move on, but I want the audience to see it. It's one of, if you want to go to the next photograph for me here, that's one of President Bush, of course, and President Clinton after their presidencies, and this is taken in New Orleans after Katrina when they were on a relief raising money here. Now let's go to this next one, because this is one of, much to your chagrin, one of your most famous photographs. And why much to your chagrin?
This picture, there were two of us on the plane on this trip, and it was from Malta to Tripoli. And the trip had not been advertised because obviously the Secret Service and the government didn't want people knowing that the Secretary of State, Mrs. Clinton, was going to visit Libya. That was a dangerous trip. And so they didn't let the press announce the dateline of this picture or the writing that day until they were in the air and almost in Tripoli. So before we took off in this helicopter, it's not a helicopter, it's a C-17, and it's a transport plane. It's what they take the presidential cars in and tanks in and all those troops in. And the press secretary said the Secretary of State asked this other photographer from Reuters if we would like to go up and take a picture of Mrs. Clinton before we took off. Well, I never said no. I always said yes. And the two of us went up, and we were standing against the wall right behind the cockpit. And all of a sudden, she started leaning down and reaching into her bag. And she had her BlackBerry, and she was obviously trying to find glasses to put on so she could read it. And she pulled out dark glasses and she put them on, and I said to my colleague, she's not going to like this picture. She's put dark glasses on inside a transport plane. And so we started to shoot because it was an interesting picture. There she was in a place you've never seen her before. And she was reading her blackberries. So I shot the picture, and I thought it was a little bit weird. It kind of, to me, looked like Dr. No, sort of a weird picture. And that was that. And on we went to Tripoli, and on we went everywhere. Well, on Friday, I guess it was Michelle who called me and said, well, we've got a really interesting layout here. And Rick Stengel, who was managing editor at that time, did say to me that it was considered for a while for the cover. And anyway, it ran in the magazine. It ran double truck across the magazine. And I was very pleased to see it there. I thought it was different and kind of weird. It was different. She loved it. And so her staff told me, and they asked me if I would let them put it up on her, what do you call it? Facebook page.
Oh, yeah.
She had a Facebook thing. And she wanted to use it. And Nick, her press secretary, said to me, and of course we'll credit you, Diana. I said, good, perfect, of course you can use it. And so up it went on her website, or not her website, her Facebook page. Yeah. And then it wasn't much after that, maybe a week or two, that I discovered, someone pointed out to me that it was a meme. And this was a new thing, memes. And I didn't have any idea what it was. And that the meme had gone viral. Well, you have to understand, Don, this is language I don't know. You have to remember my age. And I said, what does that mean? And they said, it's gone all over the world, millions of people. I said, who stole my picture? And I said, what do you mean? Who took my picture? Where did they get it? And everybody said, oh, Diana, on the net, everybody steals everything. I said, don't they have any rules and regulations on the net?
This is the chagrin part.
This is the chagrin part.
It's a very famous photograph for that reason, obviously.
Well, I was asked to come down here to South by Southwest to talk about it with the people who'd made the meme, whose names I've conveniently forgotten. And so I came down and I said to them, I just don't know how you had the nerve to go to the Time website and steal my picture and not credit it. And I said, and you made this meme. And I said, you don't credit Reuters when it runs in color, and you don't credit me when it runs in black and white. And I said, this is just awful. But gee, guys, I've never had a picture go viral before and be seen by all those millions of people. So on one hand, I was gurring. I was being angry with them. And on the other hand, I was pretty excited that I had a picture that went viral.
But it was your introduction to the Wild West, right?
Yes, it was.
Well, we've got, we failed to say that this is when Hillary was Secretary of State.
Yes.
Now we're going to go back a little bit, and we'll go to this next photograph, which is called The Joke. And so you want to tell us what's going on here?
Well, you know more about this picture than I do, Don Carleton, which he's going to have to tell you what I mean by that. But I got a call from the bureau chief of CBS, who was a good friend of ours, and he asked me if I would photograph Walter Cronkite's last interview with a sitting president. He was retiring. And then I would hand the film off to the AP, and they'd put it on the wire. And I was thrilled to have this assignment. And I shot the picture of the interview, and it was fine. It was a very dull picture, but it was there, and it was fine. And then I was putting everything into my bag, and I'd handed the film off to the AP guy. And someone told me a long, long time ago, when you take pictures and your assignment's over, and you put all your gear away, always leave one camera with film in it. You never know. The guy might come back in the room or something. So I put color film in my little Leica, and I had a little flash attachment, which I put on it, put it around my neck, and all of a sudden, the man in the foreground, whose name is Bud Benjamin, and he was an official of CBS, came running into me, into the Oval Office where I'd just finished doing the picture. And he said, Diana, get your camera, quick, come with me. You're gonna love this. And so I went off with my one camera with a 35 on it and a little flash on the top and one roll of film in it. And I walked into the room swiftly, time enough for Bud to hear the end of the joke and start laughing. Now, I was given lots and lots of opportunities behind the scenes in the White House, and I think one of the reasons is that I proved over the years that I never talked to my writers about what I heard or saw. I would just say, Schultz was meeting with Reagan or something like that, because I wasn't a reporter, I was a photographer, and I had a camera, I didn't have a pencil or a tape recorder, and I felt very strongly that that was my rule and that was it. I would never report on what I heard. If I had the opposite, I would never have been let in behind the scenes. But what nobody knew at that time, or for quite a while, is that I'm very deaf and I can't hear. So they had no reason to worry about me at all. And so I missed the joke. And it was, there are all the President's Men. You can see Jim Brady in the back. It was before that horrible shooting. And there they all were in hysterics. So not long after this, I had an appointment to see Don Carleton of the Briscoe Center for American History. And I went down to see him, and I walked in the room, and he said, I bet you want to know what the joke is. And I said, you know? And he said, yes, I know, because Walter Cronkite is my great friend, and he also has left his archives to Briscoe.
Right. Well, I was working, the reason I knew this is because I worked with Walter on his autobiography, his memoir, A Reporter's Life, and we worked for quite a long time on this, and my job was to pull stories out of Walter so he could take them and put them in his book, and it was an oral history type of thing. And at any rate, one of the things I did to help Walter's memory was use photographs. And I would show him a photograph and say, okay, well, that's almost like what we're doing right here, in fact. I mean, and so I had this photograph of Diana's, and I said, you got to tell me what's going on here. So he said, and it turns out, and I got to know this very well working with Walter, that he had this world-class collection of very dirty jokes. I mean, probably Ripley's Believe It or Not level. And he loved to tell them, the dirtier the better. And you have to, I'll put this in context, he came from the front page world of the 1930s, when the city rooms, the newsrooms were all men, with cigarettes dangling out of their lips, and, so he just had this whole storehouse of dirty jokes. Well, he'd been told before he met with Reagan that Reagan loved a good dirty joke. So it turned out Reagan told a dirty joke first, which let Walter then open up with his worst one. It was even dirtier, and that's what happened. But when Walter told me the joke, he absolutely made me swear that I would never tell anyone.
I have tried this now several times to get him to tell the joke, but he won't tell it.
She even cornered me at an exhibit that you had in Washington, D.C., and the writer Edmund Morris was with you, and Morris was writing this biography of Reagan, and the two of you cornered me because you had this photograph in the exhibit.
No.
And Morris, I just went, "You've got to tell me. I want this in the book." And I got out of there somehow with that. So if we go to another interesting photograph here of what I say is sort of unabashed whimsy. So this is see no evil, hear no evil. What is this? Big no evil.
Oh,
Who are the figures in this?
This is Secretary on the left, Secretary of Defense William Cohen, President Clinton, Secretary of State Madeleine Albright, and Sandy Berger, the National Security Advisor. And I was on assignment to photograph Madeleine, and it was going to be a big story on Madeleine. And so she brought me in the limo over to the Reagan building where NATO was meeting in the Reagan building. And when I followed Secretary Albright into the holding room, into the green room, the president was sitting alone in the middle of the sofa. And he said, "Oh, Madeleine, come over and sit next to me." So she sat down next to him, and then Secretary Cohen came in, and he said, "Oh, Bill, hey, Bill, come sit over here with me, next to me here on the right." So he went over, and the three of them were sitting in a row like that. And then Sandy Berger came into the room, and he just sat against the wall on that small chair. And over me is a television. So I think the president had been watching the news or something before we came in. And so there they were, sitting like that. And the president all of a sudden said, "Look at us sitting here in a row like this." He said, "We look like those monkeys." And he said, "You know what I mean. Hear no evil, speak no evil, see no evil." And Sandy said something like, "I'm evil." And so I went to, I had my camera up watching this, and there was no press in the room. This was behind the scenes, and there was one White House photographer there. And they did it. They went like this, and I couldn't believe it. And I thought to myself, this picture does what I always want people to understand, and that is that these exalted positions, these people of power, are funny, normal human beings who have a sense of humor. Most. Yes, most. And I sent one of those pictures to each one of them. And I called up each one of them and said, "I hope you don't mind. It's not running in Time magazine this week," because it was totally inappropriate for the serious story. So it's not running, but I'm going to enter it in the White House News Photographers. I have to enter it, and it's going to win, and it did. But I sent it to all of them, and I have one for myself that is signed by all of them, and they all have funny things to say. But Madeline, what she said is absolutely the best. She said, "Diana, you have never taken a better picture of me."
Well, you know, you've also done a lot of great portraits, and when we go to the exhibit in just a little bit. Be sure and look at the portrait work that she's done, which is wonderful. And let's go to this next one of a dear friend of hers, the great actor Jamie Lee Curtis, who looks like she's really trying to get on the level with you about something here. You have a great relationship with her. You want to tell us just a little bit about it?
Well, she's very funny. She's naturally funny, and also very serious, also very smart, also in this audience somewhere. This was her 40th birthday, I think, and she was taking a bunch of friends to Las Vegas, and I was lucky enough to be included. So I said, I guess I yelled at her and said something like, "Hey, you." And she just sort of naturally went like that down in the window, and there she was.
And she's a photographer also.
Yes,
and
she
that's
is.
what maybe one of the things that bonded you, right? The two of you was photography.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, this next portrait is of Steve Jobs of Apple. And Diana did a very special project, had a special relationship really with Steve Jobs. And when Walter Isaacson's biography of Steve Jobs was published, her photographs of Steve Jobs impressed him so much that he actually placed, if you have a copy of the book or don't have one, get one, placed a portfolio of Diana's work, photographs of Steve Jobs in the middle of the book. I understand that your relationship with Steve Jobs began with you actually being rude to him.
You're picking up all these things about my career that I want to forget.
I have my sources.
Yes, well, I was rude. I got a call from Michelle, I think it was from Michelle, and she said, "We want you to go out to photograph Steve Jobs, and it's going to be diplomatically difficult because he was upset with the photographer we sent last year. And this is for a big story, not Man of the Year, but it will be about the Man of the Year. And there are other subjects in it, and including Steve Jobs. So she said, get what you can. We don't know if he's going to give you any time, frankly. And good luck. So out I went, and he was speaking to a group of students in a lounge at Stanford University. And of course, the light was terrible. It was at nighttime, and there were just a few lamps in the room. And so I had to kind of creep around the floor and try and make some kind of pictures of him, because I didn't know if I was ever going to see him again, and whether he'd let me come to his office the next day or whatever. And so in the middle of his talk, someone said, "Steve, have you had any sort of has anything happened to you since you were Man of the Year of Time magazine last year? Has your life changed at all?" And he said, "Well, I have these paparazzi who are following me, and they're very annoying." And there I was, the Time magazine photographer and not a paparazzi. And there I was on the floor and sort of caught, trying to get a picture of him. And I thought, that's really a lousy thing to say. And so afterwards, everybody was going up to him and thanking him for talking to them and everything. And then he slowly, all the audience left. And there I was. And I said, I didn't say anything. He walked right up to me and he shook my hand and he said, "Hi, I'm Steve Jobs." And I said, "Oh, well, I'm Diana Walker. And gee, you were rude about me just now." And he said, "Rude? I was?" He really didn't think he was being rude. And he said, oh, I didn't mean to be rude. And I said, "Well, you were. And honestly, I've got children older than you." And he looked at me and he said, "No, you don't." And I said, "No, I don't." And the two of us started laughing, and that was the beginning of a very nice relationship.
Well, that portfolio that Isaacson put in his book was really good. And we've got some more of these in the exhibit here. I want to, you have worked beside, or in some cases probably in front of, a lot of outstanding photojournalists, including a native Texan, Dennis Brock. And you want to show this picture that you took of Dennis.
Where are you, Dennis?
Dennis Brock is with us tonight, and by the way, so this is obviously Dennis is you caught Dennis here doing the full body security screening, but I wanted to say that we have a number of photographers here tonight, obviously, and Dennis is one of the photographers whose archive is also here at the center. Well, he has an honored place here as well. Also, David Valdez, who was President H.W. Bush's White House, official White House photographer. His archive is also here at the center. And David is also here with us tonight. In what ways has photographic coverage of the presidency changed since you began your career, between when you began and what you know now? How has it changed, or has it?
I'm not really knowledgeable on the subject, because when I left the White House in 2001 in January, I had done it for so long. I had photographed Carter a certain amount, and then Reagan for 2 terms, and then George Bush for 1 term, Clinton for 2 terms. I honestly thought it was time for me to go. And I haven't been back. I did go back after 9/11 because not having a White House press pass was really, you really couldn't get into the White House. So I went down for them for a couple of days because their new White House photographer didn't have a credential yet. And the other one was with the president hiding somewhere.
I want the next photograph too, please. Go ahead.
Oh, well, I don't know that it's changed that much until Trump. And when Trump was president, it was, I don't think what I know from Win McNamee, Wally McNamee's son, who's an excellent photographer, and he works for Getty. From what I understand, and this is not extensive knowledge, that it was so kind of crazy when he was president that the White House press office just didn't work in the same way. So I think lots of things didn't work in the same way and weren't as organized as they were when I was there. But I think probably Dennis could tell you more about it than I can.
Well, you know, there's your pink ladder, by the way.
Oh, yes.
I love this photograph, though, because it really shows you in action. I don't know who took the picture. Do you know who took this picture?
Yes, this picture was taken by Bill Fitzpatrick
Oh,
of the White
okay.
House, who is one of the White House photographers. And I was doing a story on the president, which was entitled, Why is this man so popular? And I wanted him to look his most charming self. And so I got on my little pink ladder that Dirk and David Kennerly bought me in Japan. And because we were always using ladders to get up or get over or whatever. So I'm on my little pink ladder, and I am trying to ask the president various things that I think will make him charming. And he couldn't hear me because I put my camera in front of my face. And as we all know now, Reagan was very deaf. And he had to see my face, and he couldn't. And so finally, Bill Fitzpatrick wondered what in the hell I was doing. Anyway, I took my camera down, and I said I'd run out of all my stories that I was trying to ask him to get him going. And so I just looked at him and I said, Mr. President, you know, I've been traveling a whole lot with Mrs. Reagan, and she's just terrific. And he looked at me and he said, she's just wonderful. Bingo, there was the picture.
That's what you just said. That's great, you know. I love, like I said, the pink ladder. But here's the thing that I want to mention, too, about Diana. One of the reasons we're particularly excited that we have Diana Walker's photo archive is we've been we have been building our collection of women photographers as well. And we've been very successful. And one of them, photojournalists, documentary photographers that we're proud to have their collection, among many other women, is Wendy Watrous, who is also with us here tonight. Wendy and her late husband, Fred Baldwin, also have their archives with the Briscoe Center. So we're working on that end of it, as well as more women enter the whole field of photography. Carolyn Cole is another one, for example, whose archive we have. Let's see the next photograph, because it's an important one, because that, of course, is Diana on the left. That is the late Dirk Halstead in the center, and that is the ever important David Hume Kennerly, who was a Pulitzer Prize, is a Pulitzer Prize. He's not a was. He still is a Pulitzer Prize winner. David will be glad to hear that. He's with us here tonight. And the reason that this is such an important photograph for us really is that, of course, these are your former colleagues in the business. And all three of these individuals in this photograph played a key role in the creation of the huge photojournalism archive that we have today. And of course, you, Diana, with your collection. I met Diana through Dirk Halstead. We have Dirk Halstead. Sadly, Dirk passed away a year ago, but we now have a Dirk Halstead photo intern position at the Briscoe Center. And then, of course, Mr. Kennerly. David played an absolutely crucial role in initiating our photo archive here at the center. And I really want to do a shout out. David is here as well today. We have, but to this point, the entire archives of 75 photojournalists and documentary photographers. And the total of images is something around 9 million. I have someone in the basement of the center counting each one of them, right? Right. So why did you decide, Diana, to go with us?
Why?
Yeah.
because David and Dirk told me I was going to do that. And I was going to do anything my colleagues suggested. I hadn't even thought about archives when they brought it up. And I said, sure, well, sure, I'll do that. Sure, why not? And then I found out what Don was doing and what he was collecting. And I said, hell yes, I want to be with my colleagues. And I'm fascinated that he wanted to have photojournalists who had photographed at the White House. And that was his view. And since the White House staff photographers, their work necessarily goes to the library of the president. And photojournalists have a slightly different point of view from a staff photographer. You just have to. If you're staff, you're trying to please your boss. And a photojournalist, in my view, is impartial, or tries to be as impartial as they possibly can be. I don't think you're ever totally impartial. But that's why I came here. I came here and I liked you. And and I liked
And I like you, Dinah.
I liked Alison Beck. I liked Alison Beck. She came up to Time and I met her and I said, these are good people. And my work, I hope, will be preserved well, and I know it will be, and I know it's useful. I know that you don't just leave it in the basement.
Well, they're counting it, is the only thing.
Yes, they're counting. So that's why
thanks for mentioning Alison Beck, because Alison Beck, who is our director of special projects, who's worked with me for many years, actually, and she was right there at the very beginning and has continued to work with me to build these collections. And so I think nearly all of our photographers, I'm sure all of them, know Alison Beck and know the role that she's played in this. And so I want to be sure and point that out. And let me also say, when you're talking about the official White House photographers now, you would also agree, I think, that those official, there may be an exception or two. We have the archives of Bob McNeely, who was a White House photographer for the Clintons, Eric Draper for George W. Bush, and of course David Valdez for 41.
But what part of their, are you collecting their White House work?
No, well, of course, all of their White House work, all of it goes to the Presidential Library. Right. So nearly every one of the White House photographers that we've worked with have their own collection that they took from the White House work. But where I wanted to go with this is that every one of these photographers, and as I say, there may be an exception, I don't think so, have a professional life outside of the White House, before and after.
Of course.
David Kennerly, for example, won the Pulitzer covering Vietnam. So, you know, we get it both ways that way. And so that's one of the things we have focused on. You're right. Well, listen, absolutely. I mean, I want everyone to please join me in thanking Diana Walker.
Thank you.
We're running a little late tonight, but you know, Austin traffic. So please join us now for a reception at the Briscoe Center. And you just go back up the stairs and cross the breezeway upstairs. And hopefully most of you know where the Briscoe Center is. And our staff is out also to help guide you there. We have food and drink, but even more important, we have this exhibit of Diana Walker's work. So please, I hope I see all of you up there. So good night, and thank you again for being here.